All right, so it is week 6, day 4, part 1, and today's going to be another one-part day. Um, what we're going to be talking about is adding a template view to our existing week 5 Twitter clone application. So if you need to get to that, when you're watching the video, pause the video and get to it. But my main goal for today, and if I can accomplish it in an hour and 40 minutes, which I think I should be able to, is to build out a front end that retrieves all of the tweets in the database and shows them on the page. And it can show it in a very basic way. And I'm going to do that with JavaScript, and it's going to be a lot of stuff you guys haven't seen before. But I'm doing this with the intention of showing you how all of the pieces work together so that when you get to React, you kind of understand what's going on kind of behind the scenes, because React will take a lot of what we're doing, because I'm not going to be using React today, but React will take this mindset and apply it in a more structured way. Think and compare, like when we initially touched on Flask. Remember how we made like that little function that returned one view by decorating it? Is a very small piece of the puzzle. But then we moved into Django. Django gave us much more stuff, but it also did a lot more stuff in the process. That's kind of like what we're doing between just JavaScript and React. So when you get there, you'll see that there's a difference between what we're doing today and what you're going to be doing. But the act of getting data from the back end and showing it on the front end, the mindset will be the exact same. How you think about the problem will be the exact same. You are still encouraged, as always, to stop me and ask questions about what I'm doing. Even though I am kind of just taking you on a survey of JavaScript, please stop me and say, what is that doing? If I don't do a good job of explaining something, please let me know. I'm happy to continue to explain something if it's not clear. Okay? Sweet. So for me to move forward with this, I need a template view, I need a template, and I need some static files. So this lecture can also act as a way to, I don't think I had any of that stuff in here. Good. As a way of reiterating how to get templates and static files working in an application. So in order to do that, I want to make a template view for my slash route, because notice that I don't have anything for just the base slash route that will take it to a template view. Like, that's my main goal right now. I don't care about any JavaScript stuff. I like to break these problems down into small, achievable pieces. And that way, most everything we're going to talk about today has already been talked about except for the JavaScript piece. So I need to create a view, an app.views. I need to create a view that will serve up an index.html template. So I'm going to do that by creating a template view, class-based view. It's a class, we'll call it our index view. That's going to inherit from template view. And I'm going to give it a template name of index.html. I'm going to now import template view up at the top. So from Django.views.generic import template view. I'll give you a second to type all that out. Programming is a lot of typing. We probably should have told those kids yesterday about that. I want to see 100 words per minute.
There used to be really fun keyboard games that I remember playing.
Those don't exist anymore, do they?
I can't remember what it was, but it was the shit.
I played Mario Teaches Typing a lot, and Mavis Beacon. Played with those a lot. All right, so everybody got the template view in there? All right, so we also need to make sure that this works. So I'm going to follow you all to Carolina Code School, Notes, Week 5, Twitter clone. Okay, I'm in our project now. I'm going to say manage py, run server. Click the system starts up. So I'm now running my app, and I'm going to go to localhost 8000 to see what we get. Sweet. So that tells me that the app is going to get somewhere. It's not just going to say I can't start up.
So quick kind of off-topic question, but
yeah.
The way we imported pushed them together today through Heroku, is that just an active URL? You could go to that right now
Yeah. So Salty Reef is still running.
Okay.
So you could like link somebody you know, say like, hey, I made this little endpoint that has all this data here, and all this data is from my database. You can also create things that are there and all sorts of awesome stuff. So that is a real life app running on the internet that because like you're asking because nobody's able to go to localhost 8000, but they are able to go to Salty Reef, whatever that is. And eventually we're going to have your portfolio is running on something.herokuapp.com. Eventually, it's up to you. I highly recommend you do is you're going to buy a domain name and we're going to point it at Heroku so that you can go to like kevinbeach.com and it'll redirect, right? So actually, I just want to check something really quick.
Would it do like a literal redirect, or would it just like?
No,
are we gonna change the
it's not a
domain
redirect.
entirely? Okay.
Yeah, I think Beach is actually a top level domain. It's an invalid TLD. I thought you could get Kevin.beach,
That'd be pretty cool.
but there are all sorts of other ones. There's Kevin.icu for $1 a year. Kevin.site is a premium. Kevin Solutions. There you go. $3.88 a year. Let's go to the new TLDs. These are usually a little bit easier to find. Kevin.africa. Kevin Lat. Kevin.org.mx. Kevin.art3000. Kevin.baby. Kevin Cam, $510. Kevin.doctor.
Doctor, there we go.
New future there. Kevin.
Just following around everywhere.
Kevin.mom. There you go. Kevin for sale. That's a great like site to market yourself. Kevin.rehab.
Yeah.
I love some of these TLDs. Some of these are so bad. I love that Kevin.accountant is like $650 and then Kevin.accountants is $10 a year. Kevin Barr.
Space Force. There's Kevin.Space Force.
I don't think so.
That's what I really want.
So yeah, so we tried to go out to Namecheap earlier. It's fun to do sometimes, but you can go down a hole. So what we need to do now is we need to wire up our slash route in our URLs file. So let's open up our URLs file, and I usually like to put these at the top. So I'm going to say path of empty string is going to map to our index view.as view. And if you're going to put it at the top, do not forget to put your comma there. Never forget to put your comma there. And then I'm going to import index view. So those are the two things we add to our URLs py, which ultimately are going to reveal that we have a bug or we have an error. When I refresh my page now, it's going to say template does not exist. So this is saying the same. What's that?
We haven't created the template folder in the index.html.
Exactly. And this is giving me that same error we had that last time that we tried this, where it's like looking at all the installed apps for templates / index.html, but it doesn't work. So, oh, that's for the engine Django. So let's go to our app now. We can make our templates folder. So I'm going to control click on the app and click new folder, and that's going to be templates. And in there, I'm going to make a new file of index.html. And if you want that starting HTML, I never did look into like the HTML snippets. It's still available in Slack. It hasn't erased itself yet. So if you go to your Slack channel, let's go and connect to there. Anytime now, Slack. I had a great tweet last night that like I wrote out and everything, and then I tweeted it, and then I instantly deleted it because I was like, I don't need this publicly painting a picture of who I am. The tweet essentially said, I love that I can schedule do not disturb hours in Slack, but I would also love it if I could schedule time where it just deletes my account and I never have to use it again. I was like, oh, that's a little too complainy. So here's the body of text there if you want to follow along. I know I told you all that you don't need to follow along, but if you are following along in the video, like later, slow down a little bit at 0.5 speed when I sound like this. That'll be how you get it. So look up into Slack to get it. Okay. With that, though, we should be able to refresh, and we're still getting this error. I don't remember what we did to fix this error before. Oh, we had to refresh the server, remember? We just had to restart the app. I rerun the application. And there it is. There's our template. A blank screen never looked so good, right? Am I right, folks? Just to make sure, though, that it is serving up the right thing, I'm going to put an H1 tag here, and it's going to say Joel's awesome Twitter thing. Whoops. There we go. So we know that where we are is where we want to be. Okay, so now what I need to do is I need to load up some static files. I want to load in Bootstrap. I'm going to do that from a CDN, so that'll be easy. And I also want to load in jQuery, which is just a library that helps me write JavaScript. Actually, no, I'm not going to use jQuery. We don't need to use jQuery. It'll add a little difficulty, I think, for me, because I haven't used not jQuery in about a couple months. So I'm trying to remember what to do there. Let's see, we're going to not use jQuery, we're going to use fetch. And we just need static files. So let's go back and also grab that static files dirs, which is right under the HTML. That goes into our settings.py file. What's that? Yeah, I everything I add usually to, unless I'm like editing something like allowed hosts or installed apps or databases, I'll throw it on the bottom. Just because that sort of groups together all the stuff that I added. And in case I want to know if I made a mistake or if Django made a mistake, I can usually find my mistake down here. Because trust me, I make a ton of mistakes. It's part of being a programmer, no matter how much experience you have. All right. That static files dirs says that there is going to be a directory for static files that is at the root of my Twitter clone project, not in the project directory, and it's not in the app directory. It's right here next to manage.py and DB SQLite. So I'm going to control click on the Twitter clone root directory, which is right. It's pretty much in line with manage.py, and I'm going to create a directory called static. And inside of that static, I'm going to make another folder called JS, because I like to keep my static files organized. I don't like to put the CSS with the JavaScript with all the other stuff. And I'm going to make a file in there, call it app.js. Now my goal is to write some JavaScript that will execute when I load, we're going to say hello world, that will execute when I load up my page. So if I was to refresh my page right now, would this work? Would I see down here in the console the hello world or the hello word? Yeah? I'm trying to trick you guys, by the way.
I think it did last time. We never did tell it to run that.
That's correct. Just because the app.js exists there, we still need to, I'm going to close all these tabs, close other tabs. We still need in our template, like I said, I was trying to trick you guys there. I still need to say that I have a script source and I need to tell it to go to, well, would I just put like /static/js/app.js? Is that the thing to do here?
We have to add the thing about using the static things.
Yes, that was me trying to trick you. We need to use the load static import up here so we can use the static, excuse me, so we can load the static files function. And then what that will let me do is to say I can do curly %static, and then in single ticks, say js/app.js, and then close that out with %. So this is what your script src should look like. With that is essentially an import. Like that will import our JavaScript into this page. And you are going to see that a lot in front end. You're going to see front end script tags all over the place. It's all going to be script tags everywhere until you're sick of seeing them. So just think of them in your mental model that a script src tag like this is an import. Now you can also do inline JavaScript by just typing script and then tab, and just ignore that. And you can put console.log right here and say embedded in the page. Now I'm going to ultimately erase this because I want to use the script src import. But now when I refresh my page, we should see hello world and embedded in the page. When we look at our elements, we should see the script src here and our script inline here is console.log. Are there any questions so far about script src imports or inline script tags here? Yeah, I'm fine to wait. Yeah.
Are there particular downsides to doing the second one other than it just not being as clean?
As your programs start to balloon in size, especially like when you use React and it brings in like a megabyte of JavaScript to support your application, it becomes unmaintainable. Like you said, it's not as clean to do the script src. It's not typically not recommended. Now, if you need to just do like a quick one-off like console log type thing, or you want to write some JavaScript that says x is equal to 4 plus 8 and console log x, yeah, do that in a script tag here. But you're going to see when we do, as we're building out today's application, which will get data and then put it on the page, we'll see that the application starts to get kind of big. And how I need to handle that is in another file, just because keep it separate so it's not like mudding up. Because what can happen really is that when your page gets big, you'll have a lot of tags, and then all of the JavaScript will then be at the very bottom of the page. So you scroll all the way to the bottom. And then you need to go update something on the page that's like midway, so you scroll all the way up, about midway up, and you make that change and scroll all the way to the bottom. And just you lose your spot. Whereas if they're in multiple tabs, you can jump back and forth to the two spots. All right, how'd that work out for you, John? You get it? By the way, you notice that semicolons, not here, but it's here. In JavaScript, semicolons are considered optional. Now, I say use them. Maddie might not, though. If Maddie's going to be tough on you about it, then use them. Listen to her. Always listen to Maddie. Don't be like, well, Joel said we can make them optional. If you do that, I'll smack you in the back of the head. All right, so let's get rid of that script. Well, no, let's leave that there. I want you all to have that there so that you know what it does. So we're actually doing pretty well here. We've got our JavaScript application running, that JS file. It's loaded in and it's being executed. I know that because of this hello world thing here. I can look at my network tab and I can see that app.js is loaded in here through the request. So that's great. All right. So now what I want to do is I want to make an API call. Remember that drawing that I did over there, like where it says like step 3? That's where I'm going to put the API call, because step 1 in this requested the server, rendered the HTML, gave me all the location for the script tags. It came back, and then step 2 said, give me, like after the page is loaded, it says, give me the body of this JavaScript. It makes another request right here to go get app.js, loads it into the page, and then number 3 runs it, which means it says, what's the body of it? Okay, I'm going to execute this console log statement. So it's a console log here, But really, we could put a million lines of JavaScript right there, and it's just going to stay there in 3 and just run the JavaScript. So the next thing I'm going to do is a request to my API endpoint, and I want it to go get some data. So to do that, we are going to be using the fetch command. And I'm not a master at the fetch command, but it is the modern way of doing things. It is the way that you as a developer are going to do them, so that's what we're going to cover. The reason I say that is because traditional web development has used has used Ajax or some other way of doing it, but fetch is a new native way to do it. And it's not that bad. So fetch is essentially Ajax, XHR, all that kind of stuff. XHR, Ajax, fetch. It's all making an asynchronous request to the server. I said asynchronous there. Uh-oh. That word was mentioned before. Who remembers where we mentioned that word before? In what context? Yep, exactly. Well, so what was the unit we were talking about? Where did we see that asynchronousness confuse us? Yes, that was part of the analogy. Do you remember the whole analogy, Kevin? Do you want me to cover it again? I'm happy. I actually love this analogy because I invented it and I'm a genius. But what happens is, I love that was recorded too, at 10:40. What the idea of synchronous versus asynchronous. Now, as a word, you can just think that asynchronous is not whatever synchronous is. It's the opposite of it. So think of yourself in your user experience that you are a line of code, right? Well, no, we're not going to get that abstract. But let's say we're going and we're going to execute in a synchronous fashion. That means that when you go to a restaurant like Burger King or McDonald's or Wendy's, wherever you want to eat today, you will wait your turn. There will probably already be a line, but you'll stand in line. The person taking the orders will ask you to move forward. Everybody moves up one spot. And you really can't go anywhere or do anything. Like, imagine you left your phone in your car. Like, what can you really do while you're waiting your turn? Nothing. Now imagine again in this analogy that after you place your order, you're going to stand there, and it's like, you know how they usually set you off to the side. But in this case, you're going to stand there until they give you your food. They're going to finish processing your request. They're going to give it to you, and you're going to walk away. Then the next person goes up, and they put in their order. They get their food. They walk away. That is like lines of code executing. You have one line of code. It does its execution. It returns any value, and then it goes down to the next line of code. Like, that is code executing in a synchronous manner. Now, asynchronous, to carry on the analogy, is going to a restaurant and sitting down at a table like a fancy restaurant. And the waiter or waitress, the server, will come up to you and ask you what you would like to eat. Instead of you waiting in line and standing and not being able to go anywhere, you're now sitting at a table. And you're sitting with your friends, you've got your phone. You can walk away and not really lose your place. But you give your order to the server. They take it back to the kitchen. You then can go do whatever you want. You can go back out to the car. You can go, do donuts in the parking lot if you want. Like if you're like 5 or, I guess a 5-year-old shouldn't be doing donuts. But if you're acting like you're 5. But yeah, you're free to do what you want. Now, the problem with this, though, is that if you're expecting it to run synchronously, and it was an asynchronous request, it can be very confusing. For example, you guys are going to remember this now. After you make your request to the waiter or the waitress to go put in your food, imagine somebody walks up to your table and says, "What are you eating right now?" Not what did you order or what are you going to eat. The question is, what are you eating right now? What's your answer to that person? Nothing. You say, I'm not eating anything right now. That's your line of code. So that is a problem that you are going to encounter in JavaScript. And when you do it, remember that. Remember that annoying person's getting up to your table and asking you, what are you eating right now? Because when you make a fetch request, that will go to the server and take an unknown amount of time. The way that JavaScript works, however, is asynchronous. So think of that fetch function as sending your order to the kitchen. And the next line of code below that, if you were to say, I want, and you say, let's say that fetch request, you said x is equal to fetch. You would expect in Python, like if that was request.json, that x had the JSON in it, right? Like, because Python runs synchronously. Now, JavaScript does not. So when you say x is equal to fetch, the next line below that, if you were to console.log the fetch, is essentially that annoying person walking up to your table and saying, I know you just put in your order, but what are you eating right now? And you're going to be like, nothing. So what you can do, like, and that might seem, I just want to stop right there for a second, or pause right there. That might seem like the worst possible way to program. Like, if line 2 doesn't know what the answer from line 1 is, how do we work? How do we do anything? And so the answer to that is, do you know how phone callbacks work? Because that's something that's kind of new, where if you call up a place that has a really long wait, you can put in your phone number and hang up, and then the person who picks up the phone kicks off an automatic call back to you, so you don't have to sit there and wait in line. So that's called a callback. So what you can do in this analogy is that you can program a callback for that. So when you say, I've got food in the kitchen with fetch, and the line right below that is that annoying person that says, what are you eating? You can essentially tell in a JavaScript way to say, I don't have any food right now, but when I do get my food, you'll be the first to know, and I'm going to tell you. That's how JavaScript thinking works. When you think with JavaScript, that's how you think. Because JavaScript runs mostly asynchronous.
And that's the entirety of JavaScript.
No. It's anything that has to deal with, like, well, it's most of it. Like, if you were to say x is equal to 1 plus 1, you would not have to do a callback. That is an instantaneous action. That's a synchronous action. So JavaScript has these lines of some things are synchronous, some things are asynchronous. I'm going to say for the first year of you working with JavaScript, you're just going to be, it's like a crapshoot, right? You're going to be throwing clay pigeons in the air and be like, is this synchronous? Yes. And it just falls on the ground. And you're like, throw it up in the air. Is it asynchronous? Okay, it's still up in the air. It's still up there. Yep, it's asynchronous. And you shoot it. Like, that's going to be what your experience is like. You're just going to not know. There's no way to know. There's so many things that are synchronous and are asynchronous. The mental model you can build, though, is that if you're accessing data from a server, 100% of the time, that's going to be asynchronous. JavaScript is not going to wait on a server. And why do you think JavaScript might not want to wait by default? Like, it's a funky language, people think, but if you have line 2 makes a call to a server, what happens to line 3 if it's synchronous and that server connection takes a really long time? Yeah, your code runs really slow. And not only that, but the way that JavaScript works is that it will lock up the interface. So if you have line number 2 is going to hold on to that little thread there until the server gets back, do you know what will happen if we say don't do anything until that response gets back? You can't click on anything in your page. That sounds terrible. Like, that is a worst case scenario, in my opinion, for a user experience. That I click the get button, it goes to the back end, but all the while it's doing this, I can't click or scroll or navigate away or any of that. That's bad. So when you use user interfaces, you want it to, like, delegate the work to go somewhere else. So this is saying, hey, go get a server request, but let the rest of the program run. Anything that wants to know what the response from that server is, we can give them a callback for later. So we're going to say, we have code for you to execute when that server response gets back. So this is a big lecture and not a lot of code right now. But I wanted to paint some context of what you're going to see, because it's going to look weird. It's going to look so different from what Python was. So this is fetch. We're going to click on fetch, or we're going to use fetch, and fetch will return a promise. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, where's a good example of fetch? There we go. So this line right here is an example of asynchronous JavaScript. And it's a doozy. Don't worry about any of this other stuff up here. But fetch will take a URL, in this case it's just flowers.jpg, and then that function will have a .then chained onto it. So the .then is everything I've selected there. That dot then is what's referred to as a callback. So everything in the dot then function is what will be called when the server gets its information back. So when you have to think of JavaScript kind of as inside out, not top down, like you do with Python. It's a little bit different of a mental model. So let's see if we can just do a quick example of this. So in my example, I'm going to do a fetch, and I'm going to do that fetch to slash, well, what are my URLs? Let's go take a look at my URLs. To slash tweets. So let's go app.js, and I'm going to say fetch tweets. You know what? You don't even need. Let's do that. Let's do that. So just by putting fetch tweets in there, let's see what that does to my application. It's probably not going to be very cool. Okay? Look at our network request, though. Our network added, it goes to localhost, it goes to app.js, and now it's made an asynchronous request, a fetch request, to tweets. Isn't that amazing? It is to me. And look what came back from tweets. Our data. We're doing it. This is it. This is us gluing everything together right now. Fetch in JavaScript goes to your API, and it's like, I'm going to go get some data. And it brings you back some data. Now remember the constraints that we put on these. These are only the public tweets. So we can go on from this. Like maybe what I want to do after I get everything from fetch is I want to console.log the results. So fetch, remember, is a way of saying, here's my order. If I was to say, don't type along with this part, but pay close attention though, this is an important one. If I was to say, let x equal that, and that's how you define a variable in JavaScript, is you have the let qualifier on it. That says that it's going to be a variable. So if I said let x equal fetch, and then I console.log x, this right here is the illustration of, hey, send my order back there, and then console.log x is that really brutish, annoying command saying, what are you eating right now? Because when we do this, watch what gets console logged. It doesn't say anything about our data. In fact, it says that it's still pending. This is us looking at that person and saying, I don't know, I haven't got it yet. And so what we want to do is we want to code our JavaScript in a way that says, I don't know yet, but you'll be the first to know when it gets here. And so we're going to do that now. And you do that by coding in a .then function. Now inside of that .then, and the syntax that you'd use to do this, JavaScript just DGAF. It does not give a fuck. Because what you can do is you can put that on the next line. You can indent it. If you think that looks better, you can really do whatever you want with JavaScript syntax. It is like so greenfield compared to Python, where Python is like, put this exactly in this spot, and if you don't, your program will break. JavaScript, that's valid JavaScript. It's hard to read, but it's valid JavaScript. So what we're going to do is I want to put the .then there, and inside of that .then, I want to give it some code to run when the data gets back. So you see how we had that lambda there up in map? Lambda is essentially saying, hey, map, I want you to execute this function on all of those things. But lambda is the thing to pay attention to there. It's not calling the function, it's defining a function. So we are going to define a function here inside of this then that acts like that lambda. So I'm going to say function, open and close parentheses, and then open and close curly brackets. This is a callback. And this, like I said, these are very advanced JavaScript topics. I'm not going to be quizzing you on any of this week. You will not be expected to know any of this until week 8. So this is very much a freebie look into the future. And if this feels like fairly comfortable, if you're like, okay, I think I could get this, then that's great. But I just want you to see what's coming. So inside of this function, this syntax right here says that I'm making a function, just like the def keyword or lambda up there. The open and close parentheses are the argument list or the parameter list. So I can say what is coming back or what is going to be passed into this function And the curly brackets denote the body of the function. Like that's where you're going to put all the console.log and switch out this on the page and all that cool stuff. So I can tell you right now that the function that is given to fetch will be given a response as an argument. So you will put response here in the parameters, and then inside of the curly brackets, which, hold on a second, my wife sent me a message that is kind of important. Sorry about that. I don't usually respond to text during class, but that's an important one. So the curly brackets are going to denote the start and the end of the function body. So you can do a new line here, and this is typical convention. I want to console.log the response inside of that function. I just want to get ahead of you here and say that this kind of stuff here was one of the most confusing things in programming to me when I started learning JavaScript. So if this feels confusing to you, you're exactly where I was when I was starting out, because it was just weird syntax to me. I understood Python. Python kind of made sense to me, but there was a lot of things going on here. Unfortunately, that's just JavaScript. You're learning a new language. This is like you guys signed up for Spanish, and now we're learning Russian, because in order to do business in this country, we need to learn Spanish and Russian. So here we are with JavaScript.
They're all like individually fundamental for it. Function is returning the response of fetch, and then console.log is returning that function.
So
not really.
response is being passed to function, and the actual function of function is the console.log where it got passed to.
Yes, exactly. Do you want me to elaborate on that?
Yeah.
Okay, so what John was mentioning was that this .then here is saying whatever is inside of .then, I want you to execute that function. Now, this is just an instruction that we've given it. Like this function is not getting called right when I define it. It's going to get called like either 1 second from now, or 10 seconds from now, or maybe even never if we never get a response. And so this right here is just an instruction for later. Now, response is what JavaScript is going to give to that function when everything is done. So think of response as the food. The function here is going to be the action of us telling the person that asked us what our food was, this is what we're eating. And so if I said this is the instruction, fetch is going to send our order to the kitchen. .then is me saying, I'm going to do something later when that food gets here. Function is actually what I'm going to do. Response is the food that's in front of me that came back from the kitchen.
So that's not being returned until you do console login.
Right. Well, technically nothing's being returned. I don't know if that's just a vocabulary thing that we're tripping up over here. Console.log is just like a print statement. So I'm not returning anything like return X or anything like that. I'm just saying I want to call this function, and inside of that body it's doing a print statement, and then it just dies. Like that's it. So all this function does is says, when I get my food, I'm going to say out loud what my food is.
I mean the console log on the bottom.
Oh, this right here? Oh yeah, that's bad.
That would be just printing what you.
That would still be
there.
printing pending. So I'll leave it in there because you looked confused by that, and that's exactly how you should feel. Like if you all felt confused, that is the correct way to feel about it. So let's watch what happens now when I run the program and we look at the console. There we go. It ran. Look at the order of execution here, because this is important. We're at a restaurant. So think of all the things that are going on in a restaurant at one time, okay? So the first thing that happens is hello word, which is right here. Think of that at us sitting at our table. We've been seated at the table. The next thing that prints is promise pending. Okay? Well, that is line 8 being executed. Because what happened was JavaScript ran like this. Run this line of code. Run this whole line of code. And then run this line of code. Never, ever did I say fetch, that this line of code is going to wait until the network request is done for it to move on. So it executed asynchronously. Console log was called, this function was called, and then before it could finish, before we got the food back from the kitchen, console log X ran. And then it ran that little part that was still in the page. That's why that is still here embedded in the page. And then this showed up. This showed up to us. Why do you think this showed up last? It took the longest time to communicate, exactly. All of these things were synchronous. Like a console log is an immediate thing. It doesn't have to wait for it to happen. This is asynchronous. So everything that was synchronous all happened first. And then eventually, when the response came back from the server, even if it took 0.3 seconds, right? Like even if it took very little time, it's typically going to take more time than it does for JavaScript just to execute line of code 1, 2, 3, 4. JavaScript is a very fast language.
So Python is synchronous, JavaScript is asynchronous.
Python is 99% synchronous, unless an external library will implement an asynchronous interaction like records did. Records is not part of the Python core language. It's just a library that Kenneth Reitz made. And the database results have the same idea. It can take a long time to get a result back from the database. We don't want the program to be held up unless we want to access that data. So that's why it says it's still pending, and you can actually execute on it when you need to.
So that's why we were talking about saying Python was normally synchronous, but records was made asynchronous, so the program would continue to run. And so when we're playing with it, we also got that promise.
Yep. Yep. And so this is what we've got. We've got promise, which is us saying, I don't have my food yet. Go away, sir. And this response here, this is the body of this function getting executed when the food gets here. This is us saying, here's my food. That's what this console log is. This is our food right here. That's the response from the server. So I can say, I can do furthermore damage by saying response.body. I run that, and it's a readable stream. Okay, well, what the heck does that mean? All right, so let's say we want our body. Oh, we can get .blob. Come on. I think it's .json. Give me a second here. I think it's .json. Give me a second. We'll get it. Yes, it's a method you call just like requests. Oh, no. Hold on a sec. Getting JSON from fetch response. Forgot about this. Oh, I hate my life. This is the way to do it, but this way is confusing. Okay. How do I explain this? We're going one more level deep with the data. Because guess what response.json returns? Response.json does not return a JavaScript object so that we can say what the first item and what the second item is. Response.json returns another promise. We have to do another then. So I'm going to get rid of the console.log, and I'm going to say response.json.then, and I'm going to give that another function, which gets the data, and then I'm just going to console.log the data there. Okay. But I did that really fast, so I intend there to be some description of what happens later. But if I refresh my page now, there's my objects. Yeah. So the reason this looks so weird is because we first worked with a promise from the result from fetch, which made it so that we have to wait till fetch gets done coming back from the server, and then that will give us a response, which we had right here. And then that response can be converted to JSON. Unfortunately, that JSON conversion is not synchronous. So we need to say, when you're done converting it to JSON, then call this function, which is the exact same mindset of the outer server response. So this is saying, we got a response for the server, now we have this response. You want the JSON? Okay, I can't do that immediately, but I can get it for you eventually. So think of it kind of you sending back your dish to the kitchen. And then we have to wait a little bit longer to actually see what's inside of that dish.
So now we've set a variable to that. And said, what if we want to use that variable later on?
Okay, how would you want to use that variable? I understand that that's the sort of the mindset you've had in a synchronous programming environment. But let's first off make an example of how we might use that variable. Okay? So in JavaScript, one of the core tenets of JavaScript is that you are interacting with an HTML page. So what we can do with this data is instead of console.logging it, I'm going to take each element of that page and I'm going to add it to the page. I'm going to put that element onto the page somehow, so that page can use it. So
okay, so like if each tweet that we have, I mean right now that's just printing out the JSON. So if we want to print it out in a specific.
well, right here we could just say data.body. That would give us. Oh no, what did I do? What did I do wrong? Data. Oh, it's like that's an array, so it'd be data 0.body. When I say array, I mean list. Like they're interchangeable in terms of names. So you can see that we can still get this data if we need to. But what I want to do here, my next play, is that I want to take this data and I want to put it onto an element in the page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a placeholder object in my HTML, which is going to be an unordered list. And I'm going to give it an ID of tweets. Did Maddie cover ID attributes and HTML tags when she talked about HTML and C with you? Okay. Well, it's going to be ID and class are going to become very important in the coming week. So it's not. I mean, again, we're just kind of going on a trip today, so don't worry. There's not going to be a quiz on this at the end of the day. So that's going to be a placeholder for the pieces of information that I'm going to put in there. The pieces of information I'm going to put in there are going to be my individual tweets. So it's going to have like an unordered list of all the tweets that are in the project. And I'm going to the touch point for that is right here. So what I can do is I can access that element on the page by its ID inside of my function. Now I'm going to write this kind of in a bad way, and then I'm going to allow us the opportunity to make it better. So that I want us to see the algorithmic complexity within a brand new problem that we have. Because I want you to always be thinking like that as well. Even though it's really tough to fit that in with everything else, it's just something that should eventually be in the back of your mind. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a variable called our placeholder. And that's going to be used, and that's going to access that unordered list with an ID of tweets. So I'm going to do document.getElement by ID. And I'm going to pass it a string that's called tweets. Fortunately, that's synchronous, so we don't have to do a then there. So let's just double check here. We have an element here that has an ID of tweets. Okay? That placeholder is, well, actually it's not called a placeholder. Rename that variable. That's a bad thing to call it. I'm going to rename it container. That's going to contain all of our tweets. That's a much better name for it. All right, MDN is great documentation, by the way. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we want to create an element that is an LI, a list item, because you have an unordered list and you have list items. That's how you get like those dots like on a list or on HTML. So I'm going to create an element that I can set the contents of it to be the body, and then I'm going to add that to my container. And that container is my UL that has all of the tweets. So I'm going to make a new variable. I'm going to call this my list item. And document is going to be our namespace, and that's going to have a function called create element. Is there an LI example in here? No, there isn't. Good. We're not going to do that. Okay, we'll just do this. We're going to create an element, then we're going to create a text node, and we are going to put it in there. Okay, so the element string that gets put in there is the tag name. So we want to put an li element, like we want to do, whoops, something that looks like this. Come on. This is what we've created by saying create element. We've created the li tag there. And now I'm going to say let item text equal to a text node. So that's a document.create text node. Right? Create text node. Yep. What do I want to put inside of that text node? I want to put the body of the tweet, right? How do I access the body of the tweet? Data index dot. Uh-oh. We hit a brick wall, didn't we? We're going to have to, how are we going to cycle through that list that we got back from the data, that we got back from the server? A for loop! Hell yeah, we are. We're going to use a for loop. In fact, I'll do one better, because a for loop in JavaScript sucks. Well, it doesn't suck, but it's annoying. Look at this JavaScript for loop. Let's just look at it. Who wants to know what all that does?
Well, that's sort of like C++.
You're not allowed to say anything about C++.
So it's saying start at I. Setting I says start at 0 until, so like their I is less than 5, and then each increment I by 1.
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff. I'll do one better, though. We're going to do JavaScript for each. Now, for each is how we're used to working. Think of it like for x in y in Python. That's what we want to do. So we are going to do, at the very top of this function body, I'm going to put all of this inside of my for each body. I'm going to say data dot for each. That's a function. And for each is going to take another function, because for each is map. Remember how map applied a function to all of those items? That's what for each is. So we're going to give it a function, and I'm going to call that. I'm going to call each individual item inside of or we'll just say tweet. That's an individual tweet that's came back, and then we're going to do an open and close parenthesis. Okay, so I've got my data for each, function of tweet. We could put a console.log here if we want. We can say we are here. I could console.log tweet. I'm just doing this for debugging. I have some syntax errors somewhere. Oh, right here. So you can see we are here, here's the tweet, we are here, here's the tweet. So my for each is working. I don't want to just console log though. What I want to do is all of this. I'm going to take those up and put them inside of the function. And then I'm going to create that text node again, but I'm not going to say data square bracket body. I'm going to say tweet dot body. All right.
That works because you define that in the function tweet.
Tweet. Yes, that is that map right there, how it goes over each item. The for each is going to go over each. It's going to pretty much apply this function to all of the elements in the array, or in the list. And each individual element is represented by this individual tweet right here. So you can just figure that if you're going over data, data is going to be the array of objects that are JSON, and each individual one is a tweet. Now what I want to do now that I've created this text node is I want to append, or I want to set the text node onto this list item. So that is covered here. So we append child onto it. So we're going to say the list item is going to append child the item text. That put the item text into the list item. So now the tweet body is inside of the list item. And I can do the same thing by saying container.append child for the list item. And that will take my new list item that has the body put into it and takes the list item and puts it into the container. Woo! That's a mouthful, wasn't it? Now when we run this, there we go. Seemed like a lot of work to do that, didn't it? Zach, I can tell right now, Zach's over there thinking like, this is way more complicated than Joel showed us with the Angular tutorial, right? This is way more complicated. You probably don't even remember the Angular tutorial. What's that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm right.
I don't remember this much code.
You don't remember this much code? Well, Angular wrote a bunch of code, and it gave me just a little bit that I could interact with it. But this way sucks. Like, this is how you do it with just JavaScript. And this is why people use libraries like React and Angular and Ember, because this is how people built front-end web applications years ago. Is that if you would go to the server, well, they didn't use fetch. Like, fetch is a misnomer, and even promises are fairly recent. But the idea was that everything was asynchronous. So everything had to have a callback. It's just like saying, do this item, or do this action, and when you're done, execute this action, or do this other action. And inside of that action, there's more asynchronous things that you need to say, okay, when you're done with that, then you do this. And when you're done with that, do this. That is what we're doing here with these .thens. And then here, this function. So how many times, like I kind of purposefully lined these up perfectly like this. Function, function, function. Functions are everywhere in JavaScript. They weren't really everywhere in Python, right? Like usually with a function in Python, we like defined it up here and we reused it. But functions in JavaScript exist because there's going to be something executed later. So it uses functions to execute later. It's a functional programming language that is asynchronous. And to be honest, that's a lot of the reason why JavaScript tends to get a bad reputation. But there's good news. There's good news for us as JavaScript developers, is that with every passing day, they're making strides at doing things better for us. So what could possibly be better than this? What if I said we could do this, we could do asynchronous code, but we could code it synchronously? Now, I have been on the fence about showing you all this, all cohort, because I knew when the time was going to come that it was going to be really painful to demonstrate this little piece of functionality that we wrote 15 lines of code to show 3 things that came back from an API. Because that is what we did. We did an amazing thing. We got data back from our API endpoint, which went to our database. It serialized it to JSON, sent it right up to our front end. We took that data, we applied it to our page. Like, this is a marvel of modern technology here. This might feel like, oh, we're just kind of dinking around. But this is amazing because the amount of code that had to execute to get these 3 elements on the page that's how we're building web applications nowadays. And yeah, it's nothing short of amazing. So I want to kind of spend 20 minutes or so writing what I just wrote again in a new, more modern way. And this is so modern, I don't even know if Maddie is going to cover it in her cohort. So I know Maddie watches these videos. I'm crossing my fingers. Hopefully she likes this way of doing it, but this way is so new, it's somewhat experimental. Some libraries may not fully support it. So let's just see what we can do here. I am going to comment this entire thing out, and we're going to start from scratch. Because we know what we want to do. And by the way, to comment a block, you do / star at the top, and then * at the bottom. And that does a big block comment. So now when I run my code, nothing happens. We're just back to hello world. Okay. This next part's either going to be super awesome or it's going to be an epic fail. I hope it's the super awesome one.
Sounds like coding.
Yeah. Nothing like shooting from the hip, right? Especially with new bleeding edge technology. So what we're going to be talking about is something new in JavaScript over the last couple of years called async await. And actually one of my favorite dad jokes is a play on this async await. The joke goes, if you don't want your boat a sink, you might want to throw a weight. I said await, as in, no, never mind. All right, you all ready to learn about async await now?
Yeah.
All right, and here's the MDN on it. So we're going to use this as our parachute. MDN async await. So there is one crazy thing that we need to do. So this is showing like what you have to do. This is what we coded here. It's like it's a new promise. You do it then, or this doesn't show the then. But what we need to do is we need to put everything inside of a function here. We can't just do async await like we did here. So I'm going to make a function. And that function is going to be called getData. So I'm going to say function, or no, womp womp. Yeah, function getData, open and close. That's how you make a named function. Whereas before we were just doing like that. You say getData. Now, and I need to add a special qualifier to this function. I need to say that this function is asynchronous, even though everything is asynchronous. It is going to support the new async functions. Now, the good news is that inside of this function, we can treat JavaScript just like we have been. I can do a console.log and say, yay, it worked. And then when I run my program, I don't see hello, it worked. I don't see hey, it worked. That's because I just defined this function. I didn't actually call it. So I can call getData, open and close right below it. And there it is. Yay, it worked. So we can use a lot of the similar syntax. We can think like a JavaScript developer when you actually get here. But that async qualifier allows us to do some crazy things. And let's see what we can do with the async await syntax. First off, we need to make a fetch request, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a variable called data equal to fetch, and then I'm going to go get my URL, which is tweets. Okay? Now remember, if I was just to console data here, it would say pending promise. Let's watch that happen. So if I console.log data here, we would expect to see pending promise. See, like I said, exactly what we'd expect to see. But there's a magic word. I'm going to take my magic wand out here. I'm going to sprinkle that magic pixie dust on my computer, and it's going to type these few keys right in front of fetch. So with the cursor next to fetch, I'm going to say await fetch. Now when we run our code, look at what it shows. It did it. And how did we get that JSON? We had to do another await, right? Okay, or we had to do another .then. Well, I already spoiled it. So what we're going to do is we're going to say our, I'm going to change this variable name real quick because I didn't mean to call it data. That's going to be our response. And I'm going to make another variable that is actually called data equal to await response.json. And now I'm going to console.log data. I tell you, when I first saw how async await worked in JavaScript, I did a happy dance. I did a real life happy dance. There was nobody around to see it, but I actually got up and started dancing around. Because look, I've got my data here, and I didn't have to type the word then once. So I'm going to get rid of some of these console logs. And I want you to be the judge. I'm going to present you with the facts, and I want you to be the judge. That is one way to do it up here. This lines that I have highlighted. Then function, then function, then function. Well, there's also for each here. And then we also have this. I mean, I like to think that this way looks a little better. Now, this is not turning asynchronous code into synchronous code. That is not, if you were ever in an interview and you said that, and if they actually knew what they were talking about, they would be like, you're wrong. What this allows us to do is it allows us to think in an asynchronous way. The whole asynchronous thing is still happening behind the scenes, but it's allowing us to look at the code and write it in a synchronous way so that we can reason about how it's going to be used. Okay, I'm just going to copy and paste all that. Because that, right below here with the data, I'm just going to copy and paste all of that. Or what I could do is I can make a function here called add tweets. And I'm going to put the body of that function into there. I'm going to pass in the data to add tweets. Again, I'm saying this again. I'm moving very quickly. I know that. This is a survey. This is not, I don't want you to feel like you can do this after we did this. I want you to see what we're doing. So down here in get data, I can just call add tweets, open and close, and pass it data. And now it does it. You could do this a little bit differently if you wanted to compose it differently. Instead of, now you can just kind of watch with your eyes here. You don't have to code along. If this works for you and you're happy with that, that's cool. But you could also just return the data here. Do a get data. I want to set my data as the return value from get data, and then call add tweets out here, kind of like how we used to do in Python, so that the program, the function here Actually, you know what? We could just return await and clean this up even more. Yeah, that should still work. Oh, I broke something. Okay, don't do that. Like I said, don't do that. I just don't want to go. I do not want to debug that. I don't know why data for each is not a function. Data might be undefined at that point, and I don't know why it's undefined. So I don't want to trace it down. Well, what we've done is we've made this add tweets function. We can really call from anywhere that we have our data. We can call from up here. I have data right here, right? So I can just call it from up here as long as it's defined above. So this is JavaScript in a hilarious little nutshell. In my opinion, the pain point is .then, not necessarily callbacks. Like callbacks are annoying, but they're necessary because some things you can't async await. You can't async await a for each. That's synchronous, and it still uses a callback though because of how map uses it. It like synchronously applies that function to all elements in that array. You notice when I refresh the page, I don't know what the refresh rate on the Apple Play is, or whatever that thing is called. The title is not flickering, but the body is flickering. You notice that? It's not an accident that that's happening. That is how single-page apps work.
It's like the stuff below is what's being printed or created and printed by JavaScript, whereas the other is just hard-coded into the HTML.
Exactly. So Joel's awesome Twitter thing came back as a result of the first request over on the whiteboard. That was our browser saying, give me some information. And so it was already rendered. And so what it did was it rendered this empty page that looked like this. There was nothing in the UL. In fact, what I think would be really cool, I don't even know if you can do this. I'm going to put a debugger breakpoint here in get data. So that when I run the page, it blocks the execution right here. And look, when the page first loads, when I call get data, this is what the page looks like. It has paused the execution of my program. So it needs to go get all of the pieces of information from the server. So I'm going to go ahead and step over. That has all of my response here, which is right here. Then I set that to a variable called data, which now has all my stuff right here. I'm going to console log that out, and then I'm going to call the add tweets function, which I'm going to go and step into that. So now we're here. I'm going to step into for each, which now gets my container, gets my list item, gets my list item text. That appends the list item text to the list item, and then it takes that item and then applies it to the UL. Now watch what happens when I click this button now. Boom. It shows up. So this is what's happening in super fast motion when the page loads up. Is that it's iterating through here, it's doing this work, and it's adding these things. Like this thing is running at like 60 frames a second. You don't even notice that the stuff shows up, but there is that little flicker. And what that flicker is that it's got all the data from the server on the page or after the page load, and it's drawing each one in individually as it gets it. Pretty neat, huh? At least that's how we've coded it.
The debugger is really cool too.
The debugger is very useful. You should make good use of that when you're in front end because it will help you a lot.
So you would just put debugger semicolon above wherever you thought you were having your problem, and then
Yep, and then dev tools need to be open. Okay, so now that I have get data equal to a function, I want it to be tied to an action. So yes, most times when you run a page, you have a bunch of information that you want to show on the page initially. hold on a second. I wonder if I can do something neat. Okay, I have an idea. No, I don't want to do that. I wanted to put a delay inside of my API view so you can see what a simulated slow request would look like when you loaded the page. You know what? I'm going to do that. I'm going to say, don't follow along. I'm going to say import time.sleep 2 seconds. So now when I refresh the page, that is going to load up my page, and then it's going to wait for the server response. So watch my network. So tweets is still pending over the network. Oh, and there it is. So that's that request response thing that I was telling you about. Now, the page is still active. Like, I could still do stuff on the page while that loads up. So it didn't block the execution of any of those visual threads or anything. So that's why it's asynchronous. So I'm going to get this out of there. All right, another thing I want to show. What was I just showing before I got sidetracked on this? Oh, yeah, I want to add an event, because sometimes you don't want to go get more information until you've clicked a button. You want it to be tied to a user interaction. So what I want to do is I want to add an event to an action. And in this case, I want to add an event to a click action. So I want to, first off, not call get data. So if I don't call get data, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think my tweets are going to show up, or they're not going to show up? They're not going to show up because it's not going to do any work. That's where I want to be. And on my index HTML, I'm going to make a button. So let's say input type button. Its name doesn't really matter. I'm not going to give it a name. And its value is going to be called get tweets. Okay? We refresh the page. There's my get tweets button. When I click that button, I expect it to go get all of the tweets, but it's not doing anything. Okay, what I want to do is I want to add an event listener. So I want to say, let's see, document add event listener. There we go. So the first thing we need to do to the event listener, wait a second, why does this look so different? This doesn't look right to me. What am I doing wrong? You get the element. Okay, yes, that's what I want to do. Yeah, it just looked a little strange to me. We have to say what the event is. That's fine, though. So what I want to do with my item here is I want to add to that element this event that'll say, like, when you click on this, it's going to call a function. So you do that by adding an event listener. So inside of our JavaScript code, the bottom of app.js, I'm going to make a variable called element, and I'm going to do the document.getElementById business, and that was called, what did I call that? I didn't give it an ID. I'm going to give it an ID now. That ID is going to be called getDataButton. IDs are interesting. They have to be unique. You cannot have two elements with the same ID in your code. Remember that. That's a good thing to remember. So I'm going to put getDataButton. That's at the bottom of the screen, sorry.
If you wanted to apply that function to like multiple things, would you just apply it to a class that you could apply to multiple things? Or?
Yeah, instead of doing a getElementById, you would get like a query selector by class or getElement by class or something. But then you would have to iterate over each one of those items and add the event listener. Like you'd have to for each over them and say, I want to add this event listener to all of these. You can't just like say, I want to add event listener to these collection of items. You can't just do that. So that getElementById, now what I can say is element.add event listener. The first argument is going to be what event we want to listen for. That is a click action. The second argument is going to be what function do we want to call. Well, we've got get data right here, right? So I'm going to just type get data, but I'm not going to put the open and close parentheses there. So let's see if this worked. Okay, do I have any errors? Nope. My network tab did not make that API call. When I click get tweets, watch this. There they are. Watch this. There they are. There they are. There they are. So yeah, so that's a bug, right? We don't want to do that. Get tweets. But it's pretty cool though, right? We're building a user experience so that when a user does something, we give them result. Well, let's kind of focus here on what the heck is going on with this bug. Because now I've given you all an existing code base. You've watched me code it. You know where my mindset is. But what's going on with this bug here? What do we need to do to fix this bug? Like from a high level, not JavaScript level. Like, what is the problem? Let's identify the problem. Shout it out. You don't need to raise your hand or anything. We need to check. That's what John's suggestion was, is that every time we click the get tweets button, it's adding all of the tweets back to it. So we need to check to see if it's already ran. I'm not a huge fan of that implementation. Does anybody else have any other ideas?
Really quick, can you go back to your code?
Sure. Let's keep discussing ideas. Does anybody have any other ideas of what we could do? Once it's clicked, make it not clickable. So we are going to remove functionality. What if they want to? What if they do want to click it again though? What if they want to use it like a refresh button? You see what I'm getting at? Like we want the get tweets button or get whatever it's called button to exist, but we want it to like refresh the page, you know, so that if any new ones come in, they are shown. So what we could do is, what I would like to do here is maybe when we call get data, or maybe even add tweets, before it goes into add tweets, it deletes all the ones that are in there and just replaces the old ones with the new ones. That would make it so that we didn't have to like keep state of which tweets were already loaded, don't reload them. Yeah, this is not as performant, like it's a little bit more annoying to do it like this, but we can get in and out and done with this feature here quicker. I like simple, so really all we need to do is, well, this container here, we get this inside of the for each. Let's move this out of there. And let's see if it still works. So I'm going to move this container outside of the for each because I don't want to access it all the time. Like that's doing way too much work algorithmically. So when I get tweets, it still works and all that. Sweet. So what I think we want to do here on the container is I want to set the container's inner HTML. Let me see if this works. I see say container.inner HTML is equal to empty string. Don't type along with me here. I just want to make sure this works. This is how I think it's supposed to work. Yep, that's how you do it. So that's how you clear out the entire body of an element, is by setting its inner HTML equal to an empty string. So the way that that works, when we look at this, we get the tweets. Look at how our elements all fit here. So you know what I'm going to do? So I'm going to put a debugger here before we do this. I want you to see it in real time. Okay, let's just play through. All right, I've got tweets. Now, when I click get tweets again, it falls into add tweets. The first thing it's going to do is it's going to get it's going to get the container. It's going to set that container's inner HTML to nothing. Now watch what happens when I do this. They all go away. Then it's going to iterate over them again. It's going to add them all back. So that's in slow motion what we just did with our code. So that fixed that bug. So now I can just click it as many times as I want. Notice that it's making a network request. I can go look at my server. There's all those network requests coming through. I've built an API client right here in JavaScript. That's what I've done. And instead of it showing it into a console like you did with your Python CLI clients, I'm showing it on the page. And by accident, I'm building a user experience. What do you think of that? Pretty cool? Yeah. The async function. You're never going to forget async await when you think of that joke.
Do we actually need that console.log data?
No, you can get rid of that. Console.log is always just print. Ah. I'm going to add some comments here. Delete all tweets. Now, this solution won't scale to a very large solution. Like that will, if you have like 100 tweets to show on the page, this is really not a valid way to solve that problem. But we're not trying to solve a problem with 100 tweets. We're just trying to play around with some JavaScript right now. We're just having fun. That represents all of the HTML that's inside of that UL. All of the LI tags, all of the text and everything.
So okay, we're setting containers value to that element, but then we're clearing. That's then clearing the. It's not clear, so it's not like container equals empty string. It's saying the HTML.
Yeah, the HTML is inside of that container. Because this is what's called a DOM element, which and DOM means document object model. Whereas our web page, the HTML of it is a document, and we want to represent it in JavaScript as an object, so we can do object-like things to it. So this is a way of expressing your HTML inside of JavaScript, and managing it and maintaining it with JavaScript.
Create an object in Python and set its name like in the database, if we access something that was entered in the database, you have to set a variable equal to that data before you can then edit a part. So it's like doing like when we do a put, we have to actually go and set a variable to that data, and then we can modify the fields in it.
Yep.
In this case, we're not modifying, we're just setting it up.
So with the last 12 minutes or less, because I need to go grab some food, I want to give you a preview of what more is coming. So what I just showed you is not necessarily the end game for you. The end game, the goalposts for you all is React. And so, do we want to go there yet? No, let's just start at the top here. So React uses this idea of components. And we technically had an idea of a component. We had a UL that had a bunch of LIs in it. That UL could be a parent component, and those LIs could be a component. But this is the syntax. This is what React looks like. So this is what your code is going to look like. React DOM is essentially the entry point for your application. It says, I want to add a tag here called hello message. I'm going to pass it a variable called name, which is value of Taylor. Now this is what the code for that hello message component looks like. It's just a render function which you can draw HTML in. So the cool thing is that this is a live editor, so I can just say Joel, and it will render out over here on the page. So if you have a variable and you want to pass it to a component, now this is not going to have an immediate one-to-one of what we did today. This is just to say this is where your code is going. And if I change this to say like my name, of course it's broken until I access the this.props my name. Everything is sort of connected here. Now this is a stateful component, which does a bit more. Now, Maddie is much more an expert on React than I am, but this is where you also are going to have your React DOM render, put that component on the page. This is the component. Hey, look, it's a dunder init. This constructor is the first thing that gets called. It sets the initial state. This, by the way, is essentially self. So you say I want self.state or this.state is equal to 0 seconds. And then each tick, it's just going to update the state of it to be like, okay, the old seconds plus 1. I'm going to set the new seconds to that. And then down here, it just shows all of the seconds. So as those get updated, they automatically update on the page. And that's what does this, is it sets the interval at which it updates the state every 1 second. Here's a bigger application. It's a little bit more code here. What needs to be done? Teach React. There we go. Eat lunch. All of these things are all using React, and so this is all the code that you are going to be learning how to do. So it's created a to-do app, which the to-do app uses a to-do list component, which is defined right here. The React DOM just adds the to-do app component, which has a child component of to-do list and a bunch of like form stuff. Yeah. Neat stuff. It's definitely a lot to consume today. So we're not going to start a React app or anything like that today. You're going to do all that in time. But I wanted you all to see the magic, the Christmas magic of JavaScript. And async await is not something to be afraid of. I would love to see you all using it, but I understand if it's not going to make it into your curriculum. Just know that when you see these .then calls, that you might be able to replace them with an async await. Now, you won't be able to unless they're inside of a function that is designated as async. If you try to do awaits, like up here, it won't work. It needs to be inside of a function like that. It will give you an error if you try to do it otherwise. Okay? Woo! All right. What a day. What a day. Had some fun headshot pictures. I'm going to stop the recording.